It is fair to say that this gospel in particular is on the longer end of the spectrum, but an important end of the spectrum. A time in which we are afforded the chance to step back and really come to know the characters involved, to more deeply reflect upon the life and the lived experience of this Samaritan woman that Jesus encounters in St. John's Gospel, but also, interestingly enough, to begin to understand the mindset of the disciples, who stepped away and they re-enter this circumstance, all the while trying to figure out, why is Jesus breaking so many of these cultural norms that we thought to be true? But it's not just the disciples, of course. In addition, it is also the people from the town, the village, who then come out and say at the end of this gospel, we no longer believe because of your testimony, but because we too have heard the words of Jesus. So it's that narrative, it's that perspective that I'd like for us to begin to contemplate, frankly, all of these readings. Our first reading from the book of Exodus, we encounter the Israelites, freed from captivity, freed from the great drudgery of slavery. They had learned or yearned for this day. They had hoped that one day they might be set free by their God. And it was done so in the form of Moses. Moses, who came and walked among them and encouraged or sometimes chastised Pharaoh until ultimately they were freed. They witnessed the parting of the Red Sea. They had witnessed so many miraculous occurrences, but yet found themselves grumbling, frustrated by the inconveniences of the journey that they found themselves on. I could only imagine, as Moses was listening to the challenges that they were voicing, perhaps wondering, do you not recall these many wonders that occurred that led us to this point? The entire parting of the Red Sea should be good for at least a year, maybe two. But yet, they were quick to once again return to a semi-odd question. Why did you bring us out here? Perhaps we should go back to Egypt. Our lives were somehow better there. I can only imagine as Moses is speaking to the Lord, they have so little faith. But yet, once again, I must find a way to show them and witness to them your presence amongst us. Instead of moving towards frustration, which frankly I would have, if that were me, I would have been like, all right, all you who want to go back, you may, but don't forget a boat, because I don't think the Red Sea's parting this time. Regardless, I would have been off with you. But yet Moses and God continue to show patience. They continue to show these signs that the Lord is in fact present, that we have no reason to fear. St. Paul doubles down on this particular point, and it's one that I think, interestingly enough, connects our first reading to our gospel. St. Paul, in his letter to the Romans, beautifully says the following as to the reason for our hope. For Christ, while we were still helpless, died at the appointed time for the ungodly. And then he goes on to make a really important insight. Indeed, only with difficulty does one die for a just person, saying, it's hard enough to die for someone who is just. But to die for someone who is not, to die for those who have sinned, those who have fallen down, those who have doubted the presence of God, and even upon having received incredible blessings, still ask for more, that is the next level of faith, is the next and deeper expression of love. But God proves his love for us in that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. My brothers and sisters, this is the reason for our hope. This is the reason that despite the circumstances in which we find ourselves, despite whatever challenges we might face, the invitation is not to despair. The invitation is to continue to go deeper and deeper into this mystery that we gather here today to profess. That Christ is born, Christ has died, and Christ is risen to die no more. And he did so that we might live fully, that we might know the depth of God's love. That is the perspective that we are invited to consider on this third Sunday of Lent. To let go of the distractions, to let go of those other parts of our lives and this world that seeks to draw our praise and our attention. This could be any number of things. This could be the constant notifications on our phone that pull us away from reflecting on something deeper and more meaningful. This could be our constant and perhaps unhelpful and unhealthy focus on career success, academic success. This could be the mentality that says, you know what, my life will be better when I have the chance to go out on vacation, therefore negating the circumstance that I'm in. No longer being present to the moment, but engaging in some form of escapism. Just get me out of here. Well, our readings show time after time that God is precisely here. So why should we leave it? Why should we leave and be drawn away when instead we have the opportunity to reflect upon and more deeply understand the very presence of God in this place and in this time? So that brings me back to our Samaritan woman. You can say what you want about her. You can reflect upon the issues that she's had in her life, perhaps the multiple husbands, the fact that she's currently living with one who is not her husband. Maybe you might point out the fact that she's certainly aware of this fact by the fact that she is out collecting water in the heat of the day at noon. People wouldn't have done that. They would have done it either in the very early morning or the late evening. But yet she finds herself, out of her own awareness and perhaps judgment, that she chooses to go completely by herself at the noon hour, where it is hottest. But interestingly enough, that is where she encounters Jesus. As she is trying to hide, as she is trying to escape, as she is trying to avoid any sense of judgment that she's no doubt had to deal with on a day in, day out basis, there Jesus is sitting with her. Jesus listens to her. Jesus recognizes that despite her challenges in life, that her heart desperately longs to be in communion with God. And it is there that he begins to speak and draw a point of differentiation between water and living water. Between a water that after we drink it will ultimately lead us to thirst once again, and a living water that will continue to sustain us, will draw us more deeply into meaning, purpose, and most importantly, love. You see, the invitation of this gospel is to begin to pattern our lives after this Samaritan woman. None of us in our life get it right. We always fall down. We always make mistakes. That is regrettably the part of our human nature. There is a sin and grace component we just have to contend with. But this Samaritan woman isn't drawn down by her sin. She's not drawn down by her failings. But instead, we hear in this gospel, upon encountering Jesus and pondering this question, could he be the Christ? She literally leaves her water jar, this thing that she lugged in the heat of the day all the way out from her village to this well. She leaves it there, and she runs back into the town, and she begins to profess and proclaim what she had seen and heard. And it is exactly that circumstance. I want you to imagine it. The precise people she was trying to avoid, she now enters once again back into. But this time as a messenger of hope. This time as a person who had good news to share. And then we see this transformation that begins to occur. The disciples begin to ask new questions. Those who were a part of the Samaritan woman's community begin to ask new questions. They're provided with new insights. You see, this is the growth of our lives as Christians. It's about new insight. It's about revelation. This is the invitation made to us today. The temptation could be, man, that was a really long gospel passage. But the invitation is to say, what is it from these people's lives that we can learn? How might we change our disposition, our posture, and our focus so that our gaze may continue to be on Jesus? That we might learn from him, gather hope from him, and be sent out from this place to be great ambassadors of both. My brothers and sisters, we are grateful for the beautiful scriptural tradition that we are blessed with. To learn from perhaps the grumblings of the Israelites, to see the patience of God and Moses, to stand firmly on the foundation of St. Paul's understanding that hope does not disappoint. And finally, in all things, to cast our gaze on Jesus, who gives us living water, a water that will sustain us, a water that will give us meaning, purpose, and love.